Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Well, we are about to see Black Friday coming up in a few days. And before we get to Black Friday, I thought, man, we should talk to somebody about money and what money means. And I had an email come to me about a gentleman who's just written a book about this. And it really hit home for me because I see my kids in this situation where they're constantly watching videos and everything seems like, oh, I have to have this, I have to have that. And it's like the Sephora generation. You guys have all heard about the 10-year-olds going to Sephora and wanting, facial products and all of that. But this gentleman has a little bit of a different take on what to do with your money, and especially when you are passing on your wealth, how to take care of that. So I want to welcome Harmon Kong to the podcast. He is the author of Values Over Valuables, Daring to Live the Life Money Can't Buy. He's also a wealth advisor as well. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Tudor. It's an honor and pleasure to be on your show.
Oh, I'm so excited because we were just talking about how wealth that is passed on is not necessarily, there's not necessarily an understanding in the lower generations or in the newer generations how to take care of money. And I noticed you were talking about the baby boomers have made a lot of money. And it's X, millennial, and Y and Z that are kind of like, we're spending wildly. I'm like, oh, I'm X. I thought I was a little bit smarter than that, but maybe there's something we don't know. So share with us.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things, Tudor, that are sort of colliding that are giving us pause to think about it. First, yes, you're right. The baby boomers, according to Fortune's recent update earlier this year in February, estimates that something like $85 to $129 trillion is going to go from one generation to the next. Now, it will go to mom first, and I'll just say that because that's another topic, but mom typically outlives the husband. So not uncommon that mom will steward those funds first. But so that's happening in the background. The baby boom generation has amassed an incredible amount of wealth. They received modest inheritance from the silent generation. And we've amassed incredible amount of wealth because it's been a good cycle. A rising tide has essentially lifted all our boats. And now our kids are challenged with, housing's so expensive. It's hard to make a living. Do I even try? Maybe I'm just going to spend money and have a good time and figure it out later. Yet eventually this inheritance is going to go to them. And it'll go to them in a time when maybe they're in their 40s, 50s. The question is, what are they going to do with it? At the same token, we can all honestly say, has our education system really taught our kids about money and finance? And so I think there's a financial literacy issue that's also happening in the background of this huge trend, Tudor.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think that that's something that my kids have been learning in school. But when you talk about passing that on, I mean, when you talk about values over wealth and wealth accumulation, what are you teaching people in this book? What does that mean?
Well, I, over the years, have discovered that when working with a lot of families that we spend a lot of time building a financial fortress when we've accumulated funds. And what that means to us is that we have the best lawyers, we have estate lawyers that build trust, we have money managers, we have financial advisors, CPAs, and we build sort of a moat, like the good old medieval days, we sort of build a moat around our little castle. And we're hoping that we can protect that for generations to come. But there was a study about 15 years ago that discovered that, generational wealth actually doesn't last. In fact, 70% of your kids, which is the next generation, will lose what they inherit. And then when it gets down to the grandkids, the third generation, 90% lose that. So to me, that really struck me as, how is that possible? Because if you have a good moat, then it seems like it should transfer, and the statistics and odds are actually not in favor. So I really want to understand, why is that? And I think what I've learned is that we focus on the valuables and not the valuables that really matter. Like, who are you? How did you accumulate that wealth?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I see that. I mean, even some of the wealthiest families that I know, it's like the grandfather is the one who really came from nothing, built the business. And I think it's kind of interesting to watch that. You see the grandfather came from nothing, built the business. And then it's like the next generation worked in the business, but then the third generation is very interesting. They're out sailing, they're out playing, they're out doing something. And you think, okay, and I've often questioned in those situations, is there so much wealth that it doesn't matter because the investments are doing well and they don't have to worry? And then if that's the case, what does a family like mine do? How do I ensure that my kids have something, but they know that they can't just blow it all? It's not like, they get their inheritance and they're like, oh, I should go buy a boat, and then it's all gone. I mean, how do people know not to just spend when they see it?
Well, I'll tell you a quick interaction I had. This is a common interaction. And you're right. There's a generation that built wealth through this idea of hard work. My father was the same way. He said, hard work is something that you're going to learn. And to him, hard work was get out in the yard and dig some ditches, right?
Right.
But what happens is, so this is a common interaction I have with clients who are maybe entrepreneurs, had some financial success, and they're building their moat, their financial fortress. And I had one situation where, and I tell the story in the book, where we were building a generational wealth strategy, like what we call a dynasty trust that could last for generations. And I knew this client very well, and he was adamant that hard work is a core value. It's how we got to where we were, and I want to teach him that. And so his attorney drafted all these documents. I reviewed them, and I said, well, if it's finances and trying to save money and pass on the most to the next generation, to a family and an offspring that you haven't even met yet, then I say it's a good strategy. I said, however, you have told me that hard work is an ethic and value you want to pass on. So basically, you're setting up the next generation of kids that maybe you never met yet or won't meet, because this thing's going to go on forever, that they don't really have to work hard. And he stopped and he goes, wait, that's not what I want to do. And so he scratched the plan and tried to figure out, okay, we need to rethink this. How do we get it?
Well, how do you rethink that though? Because I mean, how do you plan for beyond you, and how do you instill those values? Is that something that you are working at in the home? Is that something that should be coming from school? What is your suggestion on it?
Well, I think it needs to come from the family. Honestly, it's so in the book I provide sort of my thought on what families ought to do to strive better. And I use my own family as an example. So I think basically every family has a core set of values. So everything individual has a core set of values. It's the way we think based on these values. It's sort of our lens of life, right? It's how we think, how we process information, how we make decisions, how we raise our kids, how we interact with our friends. And they're often not spoken. It's just, that's kind of the way you do things. And I kind of contrast this idea that the Dixon family is a organization in itself, and it has core values, just like a company has core values. And so if you think of your family with core values like a company, then you can recognize, well, a company needs to have core values. Why we should too. We should write those down. So I talk about discovering what your values are and write it down. Make sure, and here's the question, do your kids, you have 4 girls, right? Do your girls all know what you and your husband core values are? Like, what do you guys care about? What's most important to you? And, you should have at least 5, I say 5 to 7. In our family, we have 5 core values that we think about and the way we operate. But in addition to that, I was challenged once to create a vision and mission statement. Because I have them for the company, but do you have them for your family? And when I was asked that rhetorical question, I just said, oh gosh, that kind of hurts, right? So we spend so much time trying to figure out the best mission, vision statement for our business, but we don't do that for the family. What's going on here? And then on top of that, we don't have regular family meetings like you would in a business. I'm sure your team, you guys meet maybe once a week regularly, because you need to know, are we staying true to our values? Or do we have a vision of what we're trying to accomplish in the future? Do we have a mission of how we're doing? How are we tracking? Let's talk about that. So life gets really busy, as you know. I have 4 kids too. And by the way, I have twin boys.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. So we have a boy, girl, boy. I know you have all girls.
Mm-hmm.
So it's busy, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And twins are so much fun. But yes, absolutely. And that is, I guess these are great great thoughts for young families is to come. I mean, it's funny because we have these little, prayer buckets at the sides of the girls' bed and like, what prayers do you want to put in? And that's, I mean, in a way that's thinking about that, but to have these core values, I like that idea. I like the idea of having that family meeting where you discuss it and say, I want your input too. What do you think is important? And then let's whittle that down, because in a business, that is what we would do. And what is our mission as a family? I think that oftentimes parents are so busy today with phones and business now can be all the time. And, it's funny because when I was in sales, I will never forget going to a sales meeting one day. And this was right when cell phones became popular. Yes, I know. It's like people can't remember a time before cell phones, but it was that you could only get a call from your customer at your desk, right? So we had just really gotten to the point where everybody had a cell phone. And I walked into one of our industry meetings and I sat down, and the guy that came in, like he was like a little bit disheveled. He sat down next to me and he was like, "Are they calling you all the time?" And I said, "What? Who?" And he was like, "The customers. Are they calling you like endlessly? They can just call you in the middle of the night." It was like having a PTSD breakdown, right? And it was the first time that people in business had never been able to shut it off. And our kids have never been in the situation where parents came home and shut it off. The phone didn't ring at home. Now the business travels with you. So how do you come up with those core values and live them when family should come first?
Yeah, no, I think you raise a great point. So I just share what we do, and I talk a little bit about that in the book. Like, how did we manage that, raising 4 kids? We had 1, 2, 3. I think ours are 2 years apart, and I think yours are probably 2 years apart. So, 4 kids in car seats when they were babies,
yes,
and then
yes,
potentially,
it's crazy.
I think the thing I freaked out was 4 kids in college at the same time. Wait a second, well, we got to get our act together.
Yes,
but
I'm feeling that.
I honestly believe there's never too early or never too late to start meeting as a family. So we started doing it when our kids the youngest were 8 years old. They were just turning 7. We had our first family meeting in 2008. So it wasn't so much at that age, it wasn't so much the content that we as parents wanted to drive through to them. It was really more, we wanted to create a space where they felt safe, they can be affirmed, and have enjoyment of meeting together as a family. So,
but also kind of that concept of responsibility too, because I think when you have core values, that's like, okay, this is my responsibility. I have to live by this.
Yes, exactly. And that's where you get to articulate what those core values are. So if you say family is a core value, for us, it was faith, family, service, community, and generosity. Those were 5, and everything we talked about had to deal with that. And so a lot of parenting, as you have discovered, is not talking, it's catching. So we say not taught, but caught, right? And when you catch them doing something is when you actually get to teach them something, because they don't always, with 4, you have different learners, right? I always used to tell my kids, some of you are experiential learners and some of you are vicarious learners, meaning I can tell you it's probably not a good idea to go over the speed limit because you're getting a bunch of tickets and you're going to pay a lot in fines, and your insurance is going to go. And where another kid will say, I don't know, Dad, I'm just going to figure it out myself. And then he gets a bunch of tickets. And well, I tried to tell you, but you're an experiential learner. So
yes, I have one of those for sure.
Yes, I think every family should get one because it refines our ability to
but I think you also have to, this is so fascinating because it's something I know, but I haven't like put into words like that. And I think it's something that you need to think about with your kids, because I also think there is this desire when you're a parent, like, I'm going to stop you from anything bad. And then you're not only disappointed with the kid, but you're disappointed in yourself because you go, how did I screw this up? All kids are different and they all have different, and some of them have to live through that horrible thing for them to actually learn.
Yeah. And there's different things. I know for us, one of the things we discovered early on were 2 things I think were really helpful for us. It's really understanding our parenting style. Like, how is my parenting style different from my wife's? And then when we know that, we can see our blind spots. Oh, here I go again. I'm being helicopter mom, or I'm being savior dad, and I need to let them, fail. Better to have them fail on little things. And this, you talk about responsibility. It's okay for them to make mistakes when they're young, and you can correct that. But when they get older and make mistakes, the cost of the mistake can be more significant. So it's a very critical time to teach that responsibility. And in family meetings, you get a chance to actually stop what you're doing and let's talk about these things that happen. So we always started our meetings. I'm sorry, I skipped it. The second thing really is just we wanted to understand our love languages. I don't know if you heard of that. Gary
Yeah.
Chapman wrote a book on the 5 love language. So we did our love language for each of us and each kid. So we began to know, okay, we know that Tyler's acts of service. So he expresses love by serving us, but if we want to express love to him, then we serve him. Our daughter, words of affirmation. She loves to be affirmed. So we know that that's her love language. And so as a parent, you're trying to understand, what's my parenting style? What's my love language? What's their love language? My love language was quality time. So to me, I was super happy just taking road trips for hours and hours and hours. I get to hang out with the kids.
Yeah.
So everyone's different, but I think it's important to it's really about self-reflection. How are you doing and what areas do you need to refine?
I think that's interesting because I think a lot of times when we think about our financial health, we think about where are we going to invest? How are we going to keep the money? How are we going to prepare to have more money? And when we aren't making any money anymore, where is it going to be? It's not about how our family interacts and what our family enjoys. And maybe we are wasting money in areas where that's not what even that person is looking for. I never thought about figuring out my kids' love languages because as a parent, I think a lot of times we get caught up in, I know which this one is, I know this one, but to have them invested in that process and talking to me about, no, this is actually what makes me really happy. That could also help with discipline.
Yeah, absolutely, Tudor. And it's important for your kids to be able to know what their love language is.
Yeah.
Because it's about self-reflection and understanding, who am I? But on the financial piece, when our kids were young, as a financial person, I wanted to teach them good financial responsibility. So how do you teach an 8-year-old good financial responsibility? So we gave our kids allowance every meeting. And when they were young, we had them every month. Now we do annual meetings because they're all adults and they're out of the nest working. 3 are married. And now we do family retreats. Sometimes they're vacations. Like the last one, we went to Japan and we took a day and just had our family meeting. But when they were little, to teach them about finances, we gave them allowance. And we never used allowance as a form of, punishment, which I see that happens. You were naughty this week, you're not getting it. And what you can do is create an apathetic child. I don't care. I don't want it. I don't want to engage. So we always gave it to them regardless and said, why you get this is because you're a part of the family. That's the benefit of being in the family. However, you have a responsibility with what you've been given. And so they would have 3 envelopes, and each envelope on the outside was labeled, they can do one of 3 things with it. And all I was trying to teach them is you can do 3 things with money at your age. You can spend it, save it, give it away. So each envelope had, charity, savings, and spending. And if they had, so every time they got it, they had something had to go in these envelopes. It couldn't all be one. So here's a teaching moment. I think one of our kids was 10 years old and they put a lot of money in their wallet, right? And I go, okay, what if you lost that? Would you be upset? And he goes, yeah, I would be upset. I go, do you really need that much money in your wallet? Maybe you should put it in the savings envelope just so you don't risk losing it. And he goes, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And so those are the teaching moments. What we also did on the charity side is I told them I would double whatever they save or whatever they want to give away as a parent, because I wanted to encourage generosity. Again, generosity was a core value for us. So I want to make kids express that. And every year they would collectively say, let's put it together and give it to a cause that we all care about as a family. So we were doing this every year with the kids, and most of our family giving centered around poverty initiatives. And that's how we kind of grew their heart to generosity. Now they give to things that they care about, but we generally have our own family causes that we all care about. That has been developed over time.
So you've been doing this since they were little. They're adults now. Do they have their own kids?
Not yet.
So, but you still have the family meeting.
Yes, we do.
So
we include the spouses now, and that's gotten kind of interesting. They love it because their families had never done it. So they're going, wow, this is so cool. I didn't know that. And one of the things that we still do the affirmations. So at the end of the meeting, I usually do a devotion at the beginning to kick it off. And then they actually have a 1-page form to fill out. And I share that in my book. And on my author website. I call it the family playbook. It's not a workbook, because if you say the word work, no one wants to work, right? But if you say playbook, then the playbook sounds like, oh, that sounds like something I want to do. Sounds more fun. And when you think playbook, it's about winning, right? You're trying to pursue something. And so we want to win with our family, so that's why it's called that. But in there, there's our family, we do a goal sheet, and it's a one pager, and it lists it has their love language. I have a scripture that says, where there is no vision, the people perish, Proverbs 29. But what they do is they can fill out different goals they have, and their relational goals, their professional goals. They also have a section where it's prayer request and then answered prayers. And what's been really cool about that is when they write their prayer request, we know how to pray for each other.
Oh, that's lovely.
So it's shared as a family. And then I know what Haley and Andrew are praying for. And it's been fun to be able to look way back now and say, wow, look how God showed up in your life and answered that prayer. How cool is that? And that is
so cool.
Again, I say faith was a core value for us. And so how do you build children of faith? You got to show them where faith shows up in their life at an early age. And so it's things like that we did, that we continue to do today, but more in adult context.
This has been so neat, honestly, to listen to you, because I looked at this and I thought, okay, this is going to tell me how to manage money and then family at the same time. But I didn't really understand the depth of what this would be. And I'm just thinking about this. I'm like, gosh, so many families could benefit so greatly from this playbook, actually, because life doesn't come with a handbook. We don't know exactly how to do it. And here, if you are catching people with their kids at these young ages, then this is instilling something that you can have in your life for as long as you are a family, which is hopefully forever. So talk about where people can find this. I just want to say again, the book is called Values Over Valuables, Daring to Live the Life Money Can't Buy. And I think that this is such a good Christmas gift, because I'm honestly sitting here thinking, like, this is something that we could read as a couple. We can read this and talk to our kids about this together. Like, this is how mommy and daddy want to go forward with our family. We want to have a mission statement. We want to lead you guys in a good direction.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, Tudor. I'm super excited to hear that, especially from you as a mother of four, because I know how busy life can be. And we do have to take a pause and say, I know you've heard this before, but there's no amount of success in the world that will compensate you for failure at home. And that resonated with me the first time I read that. And I thought, yeah, I don't want this. And so I've seen that failure. I've seen dysfunction. I've seen, if you don't identify those core values and help steward that with your family, they're going to find their values in the world. And you're not going to know. Parents often hear this. I sent my kid to college and I don't know who they are when they came back. Well, do they know who they are? Do they know what their core values are? No. Well, we never really talked about that. And at the end of the day, right, it's not about what we financially leave behind, right? Talk to anyone who's amassed an incredible wealth in their last years or days or weeks. They're not worried about that. They're worried about, they're typically thinking about
absolutely family.
Time.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about our mortality, it should be an inspiration to get started, but the book is available on Amazon and different retailers. There's a Kindle version. There's an Audible version that's in process. But I would encourage everyone to not just read it. It's a short book. It's meant to be read short in a short period of time. I didn't want a long book. I don't know about you, but when I get books that are 250 pages, I go, one day I'll read it. But a short, so I cut it down a lot and was hoping people can read it over the weekend. But it's really not, again,
nice.
Like everything, it's not what you know, right? It's what you actually do. So I encourage you to actually take a step forward and do that. And I posed this rhetorical question of going back to the company ideas that, a couple years in a row, our company got awards for the best places to work. Right. Well, the best place to work. What a great award. And that, because that's a employee survey, not an owner survey. And so it's nice to get those awards. Can you imagine if you got an award for the best family to live in?
Wow. Yeah.
What would that look like, Tudor? And so that's all I'm trying. It sounds like a financial book. I know one financial editor said, how did you write a book but not have any real dollar symbols or strategies or math formulas? And I said, well, everyone's written books like that. And I don't want it to read like an MBA book. It's
I
really
love
some of the
that.
core. It's really more about the core issues that's going on inside that affects how we relate to each other, our family in particular, and then our friends and our community, and then the wider audience. And that's, I think, where we can make a difference is right here at home.
I think it's amazing. I honestly, I'm listening to this and I'm like, this is a great idea to give to your spouse, to give to your kids. I mean, I can imagine, my mom saying, look, this would be great for both of you. I just think that this is fascinating. So I want to thank you for coming on today. Definitely check it out, everybody. Again, it's Values Over Valuables, Daring to Live the Life Money Can't Buy. Check it out. Harmon Kong, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tudor, so much. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And thank you all for listening to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. As always, for this episode and others, you go to the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time. Have a blessed day.